Hello. Today I'm going to show you and give you a brief history on what the long hunter of the eastern woodlands would have looked like. Now the long hunter was one of the first people to go out and trap. They were the first in the Americas. They were the first people to go off into the back country and etch out a living through living off the land and trapping prize beaver pelts. And they did this in the eastern part of the country, in the original 13 colonies. And their peak time was from the late 1600s to early 1700s. That is what I'm showing you today. Now, the eastern long hunter. A lot of people imagine a trapper as being a man in buckskins and wearing a raccoon skin cap. That, to a sense, is a true image and did exist in early American history, but that didn't come till later when people went out west. Originally, when people first colonized and first came to this country, they came to the original 13 colonies, Pennsylvania area, and the Carolinas, and this area, New York. These areas is where they first colonized. And the first Europeans to go out into the back country and etch out the living through trapping and fur trade was the long hunter. And that was done basically in the early 1700s. Now the long hunter, as you can see, looked very similar to the way I am dressed today. You'll see a lot of similarities between a long hunter and what the Native Americans of the time wore. And that's because they, in the backcountry, ran into the natives, traded with the natives, and interacted with the natives. But one area that you will often see the long hunter draw short is as much similarities such as beadwork and things that you see along the mountain men. And that's because there was still a sense that the long hunters saw themselves as indifferent from the natives. They saw themselves as still European because this was still a very early time in American history. They were still proud of whatever descent they probably came from, whether that be English, Dutch, French. Now the long hunter would often wear moccasins on their feet, center seam, copied off of the indigenous peoples of the area. And the reason for that is footwear just plainly wore out. Boots wore out. Shoes at the time wore out quickly. They needed to be replaced on the trail and in the backcountry when they were far off from the nearest town and were unable to do so. So moccasins were commonly worn. Another thing that was commonly worn to long hunters was leggings. Now this idea came from the natives. Now normally leggings weren't worn with a breechcloth. Instead they were worn over a pair of trousers. But they were worn because they offered a lot of protection from the thorns and things rubbing up against their legs in the woods. One thing that you might also see, and this was definitely copied off of the natives of the area, was leg ties, and especially wampum belts, wampum beads. I plan to do a video later on about the importance of wampum to the indigenous peoples, but for today I will just point out that this was something that was certainly copied off of the natives of the area. Now one thing that was common was actual cotton shirts and hats, because they didn't get as into the copying buckskin clothing as much, because they realized that they could get to a town or a train post, and they wanted to get that. They wanted to feel a little bit civilized. Would be my personal belief on why cotton was still very commonly worn, to show that they were still white men. Also, it was available. See, cotton to them. Green was a very common color. White was most common. You'll see a lot of woodland Native Americans wearing white shirts. But green, because long hunters were normally a little more well off, were able to afford dyes, and they would often pick green because it blended in with the surroundings very well. They'll wear belts, big heavy leather belts to hold their equipment. They would often have a possibles bag. Now a possibles bag would hold everything they would need. It would hold their flint and steel, it would hold their ration, it would hold their cotton, their patch, their ball, everything they'd need to fire their musket. They'd also have their powder either in there or on a powder horn. They would have a patch knife was a common thing to be seen, a simple patch knife, and this was used to cut patches for your musket. It was also very common to see another knife on their belt, a larger knife, and that would be more of a work knife and camp knife for less intricate work. Another common thing to see was a hatchet or tomahawk, and the reason for this was, yes, it had the practical use of being needed. It had a very practical use to cut timber and to cut kindling, but also it was important because as natives carried war clubs, long hunters had a common time running into conflict that would result in hand-to-hand fighting. So carrying multiple weapons could be a good idea for the long hunter. And just as natives threw tomahawks, long hunters probably could throw and become very skilled with the tomahawk or hatchet. Another thing that was really common to see were big brimmed hats among long hunters. Tricorns were worn like you'd see a British officer or someone or a French officer wearing. But one thing that became unique to the civilian and the long hunter was the big circular brimmed hats because it helped keep off, it helped protect from the sun more, and it was also good for rain. That was something that became a statement of the long hunter and the backwoodsman. That's basically just a very simple history on the long hunter for you today, the 1700s. Again, the long hunters were the first Europeans to go on trap. They were the step before the mountain men. I'll probably do a video later on about more of the mountain men, the western fur trapper, the guy you picture wearing buckskins, wearing a fur hat. The long hunters was the step before that. They were the first to come. They were the ones that went out in the eastern part of the states, the original 13 colonies, and etched out a living. And these were the guys that became armed. They became well-backed woodsmen. They became great shots with their rifles. These were the first guys to really pick up the Kentucky rifle, to really need that rifle with the rifling in the barrel, not just a musket that had no rifling in the barrel, but they were the guys that needed that. They were the guys out there trudging along, taking well-aimed shots, and these were really the guys that became the backbone of America, the backbone of the backwoodsmen, and honestly, these were the guys that would later come to be known to be the real skilled fighters in the upcoming Revolutionary War that would come. But like I said, these were the original trappers. These were the original backwoodsmen in the eastern part of the country. And these guys, like I said, even though you'd see some copying variations of leggings and things among the backwoodsmen and the long hunters, again, you saw a lot of more civilized things, a lot of cotton clothing, a lot of wool hats, less fur, little less of a rugged look than you'd see in, say, the mountain men. These were, sadly, our guys are often forgotten to history, so I just wanted to take a moment and show you what the first European trappers and backwoodsmen and the early Americans would have looked like. Hope you have a good one. I hope to do more videos in the future. Thanks for tuning in.